Hi, everybody. Welcome to Newsnight for Friday, November 4th. Great to have you with us. We are now down to just hours before the big November election, and the polls will open. Tonight, we'll look at the issues, we'll look at the candidates, and we'll talk about who uses a ghostwriter to tell their life story. Those stories and more next on Newsnight. Have you already decided how you'll vote on Tuesday? If not, we have some discussion for you to think about. Here to talk about the big issues on the ballot, Ed Esposito joins us from WAKR. Great to have Steve Hoffman here with us this week from the Akron Beacon-Journal. And always great to welcome freelance journalist and contributor Jody Miller. We are 4 days out from the big election.
Thank God.
We've heard so much about it. Let's start with the macro and work to the micro. State Issue 2 continues to dominate the headlines. If you watch the two commercials from both sides, it's hard to tell whether they're for or against till you get to the very end anymore.
Two commercials.
They're both.
There's like so many of them now.
Well, both sides seem to be preaching the same thing. This is good for police. This is good for firefighters. Vote yes or vote no. Do people have all the information they really need at this point?
Yes.
They do.
Yes, they do. I mean, look, here's what it boils down to. If you're buying Issue 2 as being an argument over collective bargaining, do you think the guy who's the boss is in charge, or do you think that labor should have more of a say into what goes on? So when you boil it all down to it, how much say should the people who are actually doing the work have in strategizing about how the work should be done?
And if you say,
would you agree with that? It's a collective. It's about collective bargaining. The issue, I think, now is it's risen to the point where that argument is fallen. It is over and done with. I think Issue 2 is going to be a big loser. Every poll shows that. But I think this. I think the money that's coming in right now has more to do with the election in 2012 and positioning and painting John Kasich in a certain position that he's going to carry with him to the next election. This is an issue that was put on a platter for the Democrats and for organized labor, and boy, have they hit home runs with it.
Well, but I want to jump in really quickly here. I disagree. I don't think it's an issue about collective bargaining at all. I think it's an issue about union busting. And that's why it's going to be defeated as soundly as it will be, I think, on Tuesday. I think the Republicans in this state had an opportunity to make some changes and adjustments in public employee unions. I don't think there's a voter in this state who wouldn't say that, public employees should in fact pay a portion of their health care costs, that they shouldn't contribute more to their pensions, that there should be a way other than binding arbitration to settle a dispute, a contract dispute. But I think that this was a case where the Republicans went just too far. And in doing so, I think they raised a monster that is going to come back to bite them badly.
Yeah, this is reminiscent, as my former colleague Bill Hershey wrote in our newspaper, this is reminiscent of the 1958 fight over right to work in Ohio, which went down by 63%. I don't think it's going to quite get a thumping, as they say. I don't think it's going to get to 63%, but it's going to be in the high 50s, is my guess. I talked to John Green of the Bliss Institute last week. The Bliss Institute did a poll trying to decipher the issues. And actually, they broke down the arguments for and against Senate Bill 5, Issue 2 on the ballot. And actually, if you look at the specific arguments, it's a pretty close contest. Where the proponents have succeeded, where the advocates of a no vote have succeeded, is they've pounded home, according to this poll, that this is an attack on collective bargaining, the rights of workers. And Ohioans don't like that when their rights are threatened. They may not agree with the public sector bargaining at all times, but when you start talking about rights and things being taken away, traditionally Ohio voters are uncomfortable. The other thing that John Green noted, and I think he's absolutely on the money with this, is it looked like that this safety force issue, according to their polling, which ended at the end of October, was not really hitting. These ads about, the staffing levels will drop and we'll all be in danger. Well, they appear to have succeeded since late October. They've pounded home that message and it's a message of fear. And ironically, I disagree with that. I don't think voters understand a lot about this issue at all. They just don't get it. The irony on the staffing levels is, if you go back to the old system, If you force cities to go to binding arbitration on these safety forces issues, oftentimes the only result that the city has, as in Akron, are layoffs. Right. So it's a very curious argument. But anyway, the proponents, the advocates of a no vote have succeeded in convincing, it appears to be, many voters across the spectrum, a wide range of demographic groups, that in fact a yes vote on issue 2 will result in diminished safety forces, and voters don't like that either. And I think that's what this thing boils down to, other than it's also, as Ed noted, this is a test of strength between the, and it's sort of gone beyond in many respects the issues.
But it's a gift for labor. It's been a gift for Democrats. I mean, you just look at the fundraising they've done. The big money on this side has been organized labor.
Absolutely.
So it's not the Republican machine and the big money machine. The big money is actually the Democrat machine and labor on this. And I mean, there's such a strong current in this. Even if you look to this week when Summit County deputies, through their FOP, agreed to concessions just announced yesterday and saved either 5 or 15 jobs, depending on who you look at. But even that news release from the FOP use that platform to talk about the Kasich budget.
Right.
So, clearly there's positioning and posturing. This is more about playing chess going long term and what happens and how labor is positioned with a big win coming out of this November, going into next May and next November. And then when Kasich Taylor are up for another review here in 3 more years,
right,
and it pops up again.
Let's be clear. I mean, the Toledo Blade's done some excellent reporting on this. There's definitely been spin from the Kasich administration about Senate Bill 5 and how it moved when it came out of the Senate, and then when it hit the House is when Jody's right, it got worse. They started adding things to it that had nothing to do with saving money, that had everything to do with attacking fundamental rights of the way unions work and raise money and that sort of thing. So the Kasich team, I think initially there were signals, this just kind of happened in the House, and we were sort of caught unawares. Well, the Blade made it clear after looking at some emails that the Kasich administration was into these changes in the House up to their neck. Kasich has been the spokesman. He's been out front on this. So some of this outside money that's coming in, I think, from these Citizens United and other groups that can spend ungodly amounts of money and not account for it, is to, as Ed's implying, save Kasich. Let's try to keep this margin. Let's try to keep this from being a blowout.
Right.
And
But the interesting thing in terms of an advertising perspective from the way I'm looking at it is here you've got Governor Kasich, who is still way out in front, in support of Senate Bill 5 and Issue 2, and yet this is a governor who right now I think has a 36% approval rating in the state.
What else would he do, Jody? Politically, he has no choice but to be in front of Senate Bill 5 because it's his.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you could find a way to advertise voting for the issue without using an unpopular governor at this point. But the other thing I think, and a real interesting mistake I think that the Issue 2 campaign made was the grandmother commercials, the Grandma Quinn commercials. Because I think in using and twisting the words and the meaning of what she said to benefit the vote yes side, I think voters got a lot of publicity was given to that, and I think voters got a sense of, well, if they're disingenuous about a commercial and an ad, maybe there's something we need to look at more closely in terms of the bill.
I think there's been enough BS on both sides in these. If you really want to truth meter these things, to Steve's point about talking about how safety forces are going to be bettered by laying them off. How you can, that's the reality of this. It's still the whole argument, and I disagree with both. I think it is about collective bargaining. It's about the rules that management and labor operate under. I do think people get that. I think people understand that. To your point about taking away the rights, that is a visceral thing with Ohio voters. They don't like someone telling them, no, you can't do this. Most Ohio voters don't understand why both sides can't sit down and work something out. Right. We've seen this play out in Akron, where apparently with the police they can't, but then you go to Summit County where they can, which isn't necessarily a condemnation of collective bargaining. If anything, it's a unique situation involving those two personalities.
And there's been strong evidence that collective bargaining in these difficult economic times has in fact been working.
Right.
The other, yes, I mean, there's plenty of BS in this. My favorite on the no vote side are this idea that nurses, will be affected by Senate Bill 5. Well, almost all nurses in Ohio work for nonprofit hospitals or private doctors' offices or something like that. I mean, they're just this tiny fraction that are in unions. Most nurses are not in public sector unions. Mm-hmm. But, oh, my God, you look at these ads, you'd think that you're going to be laying there wallowing in your bed, and
they're going to pull the plug.
Right. Somebody's going to pull the plug on you.
Right.
The Sarah Palin death squad.
You should check death squad.
You never know how people are going to pull the lever in the voting booth. So it'll be curious to see on Tuesday. I think it will go down to defeat. I think the question at this point is just by how much.
I think it'll be over 60%. I disagree with you.
Over 60.
Wow. I think
against.
Over 60 will vote no.
Well, here's the thing. Traditionally, in Ohio politics, you have a complicated issue, and the default position for a lot of voters is no. Mm-hmm. If you don't understand, you're a little bit confused, you're kind of undecided. This was another thing in the Bliss Institute poll. They have a momentum model of turnout, and their momentum model is headed cautiously toward where Ed is.
I want to talk about where voters will go with this, as well as issues 1 and 3, as we move the conversation now to NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net.
Akron voters will have 2 things to look at when it comes to the schools, both the levy, $5.5 million for operating expenses, and also school board candidates. There are 3 openings, but only 2 made it on the ballot. The rest will be decided by write-ins. Jody, this is a lot for Akron voters to weigh in on the school district. It seems like a pretty moderate levy, but who's actually going to win these school board seats?
Well, it'll be curious because obviously the 2 people who are on the ballot are going to win their seats. But the interesting part is of the write-in candidates who have announced that they are write-in candidates, who's going to win? I think Roe Fox probably has the most recognized name. Mm-hmm. So that may be the case. And it's really it's a sad situation going back to Amy Grom and the Board of Elections and not having enough signatures that the Board of Election, which actually is the governing body for an urban school district the size of Akron, mm-hmm. is going to have to deal with a situation of this sort. So what voters are going to do is anybody's guess. The main thing I'm more concerned about, to be honest with you, Eric, is the school issue, the levy.
14.
Issue 14, because these are, in any times, school levy sometimes has got a hard road to hoe. Mm-hmm. These are really tough economic times right now. You're looking at a city of Akron, which I think the figures yesterday came out and said, we're dealing with a poverty rate of over 20%. Whether or not people can afford to do this, even though they may want to vote for a levy, mm-hmm. is going to be the question. You've got a demographic in Akron where, you've got a declining school enrollment population. You've got declining numbers of voters who, in fact, have school-age children.
It's a
and who
graying
have,
population.
Excuse me?
Graying population.
Exactly. So as a result, it's not that they don't have a vested interest in the schools. Mm-hmm. It's just whether or not they can afford, in fact, to support them. And to be clear about this, Akron has done an extraordinary job in cutting costs, in taking care of taking care of administrators and cutting those, of tightening up their budget all over the place, and still producing better report cards. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on Tuesday.
And even if this levy passes, the administration is still projecting cuts. The only silver lining that I see in this is a possible spillover effect from issue 2. This has become such a symbolic effort, mm-hmm. and Democrats and the public sector and private sector unions have pushed this so hard. If the turnout, again, the Bliss Institute indicated maybe perhaps a 10% advantage in turnout on the no side of issue 2. My guess is that if you vote no on issue 2, if you're motivated, you come out and vote no on issue 2, you're probably likely to support a school levy, mm-hmm. More likely than not. They might get a little bump from that, but that's really hard to say. I mean, that's about the only. It's just a really, really tough climate, and I think the Akron schools. The sad thing is, we've got these great buildings, mm-hmm. And then the question is, what do you put inside those buildings?
The average home in Akron is about $58,000. So to the average homeowner, it would be about $7 a month. To seniors with the homestead exemption, a little less than that. Seems like a nominal amount, but Ed, anytime you ask people for money in this economy, it's a tough sell.
It always seems like a nominal amount, but the one thing that the government, for the most part, can't take away from you is your right to vote on whether you're going to tax yourself, and especially when you're looking at an additional or an emergency tax levy. And so, again, that's the issue. It's even if it's $7 a month, that $7 a month means something to somebody who's on limited income or a senior citizen who's really on flat income. They live or die based on, there are a lot of people that live or die based on whether or not Social Security gives them their 2% bump, which is then going to be taken away by a rise in medical cost. So, to make that argument that it's only $7, I don't think that resonates with people. I think they look beyond that, and it's every dollar counts. And in this case, these are one of the few times where you can tell the government no.
And the classic, one of the classic lines, which you haven't been hearing very much this year, but one of the classic lines for any school levy is, this will increase the value of your property, and in Akron especially. I mean, property values are just plunging. I don't think I've heard anybody make that argument this time around.
No, well, and it's hard to do that because countywide this has hit all schools. I'm in the north, and Nordonia Hills has been hit hard to the point where it's likely they're going to lose another levy election here, and they're going to wind up with the state running their finances on that. And people know that going into it. They just don't want to vote for new taxes.
In terms of candidates, though, since we need to move it along, there are two names that are head-to-head that are perennial winners on the ballot: Jim Laria and Linda Amobian, each running for Laria's 6-year term as the Akron Clerk of Courts. This will be interesting because name recognition plays a lot, and do people really do any homework when it comes to a job like Clerk of Courts?
I don't think they do. I'm not sure they understand. I'm not sure I understand exactly what the Clerk of Courts does. I do know that Larry has been in the office for a lengthy period of time. He has done a good job. Yeah. There is absolutely no question about that. He is ironically, in a Democratic community, he's one of the few Republicans who has been a consistent office holder and office winner at the ballot box. But then you put Linda Amobian up against him, who is well recognized in terms of her name for the work she's done on the Akron School Board, so she's been on that ballot, and for the work she now does at Akron City Council. So it could be the most interesting race that Jim Laria is going to face for that position.
These clerk races just drive me crazy because it's purely an administrative position. There's no policy making whatsoever involved with this job. It's just about moving the paper.
Yes.
I'm getting there. So which leads me to wonder, why is Linda Amobian running for this? Well, the answer, the main job of a clerk is to hire deputy clerks, and it's pure patronage. It's one of the last places. Yeah. So that's the real job. And I think Linda Amobian has been reasonably candid about this. She was approached to run. Clearly, the Democratic Party would like to have the office because then you can hire, all your minions.
You get dozens of jobs that you can hire for.
And these jobs, the value of these jobs is that when push comes to shove and you need people to contribute and you need people to put up yard signs and you need people to knock on doors, you turn to these employees who are at-will employees. They are not covered by civil service. You say, Saturday morning you have wards X, Y, and Z, and they do it.
Right. Exactly. Well, they do it also because they tend to be politically astute, because that's how they got the job
in the first place.
It's not like it's not like Linda or Jim calls them on the phone and says, "Hey, I just dialed you by random. Would you like to work for the clerk's office?"
But what will voters do when they recognize two names that they've probably voted for multiple times over the years that are now head to head?
Which one do they feel best of at that time, or do they vote at all? I mean, there's if you look at any of the advertising, it's not been a negative campaign by any stretch. It's been, I'm a pillar of the community, I'm a pillar of the community. They're both pillars of the community. They're both people that have great name recognition. I don't think you can handicap this race. To Steve's point, I think it depends on how good organized labor is at getting their vote out. If there's truly a 10%. Akron Municipal Court is not the city of Akron. It also involves other municipalities. That's why the Republicans have been successful on these muni court districts, including Barberton and Stowe. That's why that they're competitive in those races, because they really are balanced districts politically. But certainly if you have a big turnout in Akron, and it's a big anti-issue too, I think it's not a stretch to say, okay, people are going to be walking into the polls with slate cards and say, here's who you vote for.
Exactly.
Mayor's races to watch. We've talked about the Akron race ad
Well,
nauseum, but there are some.
the Akron race. What I think is interesting is the Stowe race. I think is fascinating. Karen Frischel can't run.
Term limits.
Yeah, so it's Buck and Drew are both running for that, and they're both credible people. They're both smart people. I think the Barberton race is interesting. Talmadge has an interesting race, very much, that pits Sarver and Klein against each other. It just seems like this is like watching an old gladiator film with the two guys that keep going slugging at each other. These are the two big names in Talmadge politics right now, and they probably win or lose, either one of them will be. They'll keep on coming back again.
I was thinking about looking at there have term limits, have opened up races. Including the mayor's race in Richfield. I think
Right.
Lyons was term limited. And then you've had some upsets, like Jeanette being upset in the primary.
Barberton.
And I guess, not to get too philosophical, it really does matter. I mean, these local communities, the quality of leadership, especially in the mayor's office, can really make a huge difference in how the community reacts and responds to different issues.
Just to wrap it up real quick, if you look at the number of contested races and council races and school board races and these village and these trustee races, fiscal officer races, I think this is a huge election, to Steve's point, for local government. I mean, this is the time that comes around every 4 years where people take a look at this, and you tend to look at Plusquellic versus fill in the blank as being the big publicity sucking hog that it is, that everybody wants to talk about it. But there's a lot at stake for a lot of the suburbs that make up Greater Akron.
And we'll see the results, and we'll talk about them after the election here on NewsNight.
On NewsNight.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNight.net.
And again, we invite you to watch the extended edition of our conversations as well as our blog about the show over on NewsNight.net. We have a few minutes left. I want to talk about the Hudson mayor's race. There's been a controversy around Hudson businessman David Hack. In this morning's Akron Beacon Journal, Hack says that the story about his life that he's handed out for years, there's 8 different editions, these are just 2 of them, have now been written by a ghostwriter. So any problems with it weren't his. Specifically that while he's listed as an Army Ranger in here, it wasn't him, it was a ghostwriter. Among many other things, this controversy has taken off in northern Summit County.
It is not unusual for highfalutin political figures to go the ghostwriter route. I mean, I don't think Bill Clinton wrote all of his own book. Tony Blair certainly didn't write all of his own book. It's not unusual to have a ghostwriter, although ghostwriters usually do a better job of tracking the facts and pointing that stuff down.
The back does say the true life story of Sergeant Hack.
Well, and this one
quite.
says based on the true life story. So this is kind of like anything you see on Lifetime.
But if a businessman
Except Lifetime is more compelling.
If he has these for sale in his store or for free, and on his website says, I'll be happy to sign it, including this one has his signature.
The assumption
isn't he presenting it that this is my life story?
That is exactly the
and he's had
assumption.
weeks since the controversy came out to say that. Jody, to say that now, that don't blame me, blame the ghostwriters. They took my story out of context.
It's a typical scenario that we are seeing with this particular candidate, where he's caught in an untruth. He's being disingenuous, not only about his life story, which, if I read the Beacon correctly today, is not only his story is based on that, but it's also based on a videotape. And I don't know where the videotape came from, where the book is based on that. But I mean the number of medals he's gotten. I'm curious. He talks about being awarded 2 Purple Hearts for being wounded twice in Vietnam, and yet he really wasn't in combat. If I'm reading between the lines of the story, he was a career counselor trying to work with the Army forces. I'm not saying he wasn't wounded, and I'm not saying he doesn't deserve his Purple Hearts, but I think he has presented himself in a light that would be that voters would like the best, and I don't think that is a true light in any way, shape, or form.
He made it to the Rotary that his PhD now is in life experience.
Exactly.
But when you talk about the mayor's race, Steve, in Hudson to begin with, it's very much a figurehead position.
Well, what's disturbing to me in this challenge to Bill Curran, who's the incumbent, is that Curran has turned this figurehead position into a position of leadership on a number of issues, especially regionalism, and I happen to think he's absolutely right. So he's taken a courageous stand to try to connect Hudson to other communities in a positive way in terms of growth, in terms of sharing resource, even tax sharing. And what I'd sort of lost track of Hack. He ran for sheriff in the 70s. He ran for mayor of Stowe, and now he's back. You know, and his campaign is not credible either, in the sense that his central argument is that if there was a regional tax sharing agreement, Hudson would be a net loser. That's really the big part of his campaign. He has absolutely nothing on which to base this. It's just his feeling, and he's admitted this. Whereas Curran has relied on a study by Cleveland State University, which shows that had such an agreement been in existence, Hudson, in fact, would have been a net gainer in this. And this is not Curran's study. This was a study that was done by Cleveland State. So this guy, he'll
say anything.
Well, I was going to say that, but then I just kind of checked myself. It appears that he is factually challenged.
You know, I would borrow a line from a well-worn candy commercial, and it's sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. One of the great things, and Trina, sorry, I know the lawyers are already calling. One of the great things about a democracy is that anybody can run. And whether they're qualified or not, whether they're nutty or not, you guys use words like untruth and factually challenged. Whether they're a liar or not, let's just put it on the table. You can run for office if you lie. You can run for office if you're a nut. You can run for office if you paint yourself as something that you're not. Thank God for your reporting and for Carney stepping into this and other people taking a look at this. I don't think anyone in Hudson now that's going to the polls doesn't know about the credibility issues of someone who can charitably be described as a liar.
We're down to our last seconds. David Hack, though, still maintains his story, says he's standing by it.
He is not David Hackworth, who is a true American hero.
We'll stay away from that. Jody, Steve, Ed, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. Again, you can watch more of our broadcast over at NewsNite.net. Go to the polls Tuesday. See you next Friday for NewsNite. Good night.